Patches from the Frat House. How are you all doing? This is our last One Book July 2019 video. We've been doing the read-along of the Bullet Journal Method by Ryder Carroll, so this is part 4. I didn't include part 5 just because it's a really short part, so I figured we would just do part 4 and end it there. Sorry, there's a blue jay going crazy out on the deck. And I have to apologize to you all. I know for at least the last two, part 2 and part 3 read-along videos, I did not realize how loud the June bugs were outside when I was recording outside. I grew up in this area. I've lived here my whole life. I don't hear them anymore, like at all. Like my brain must have tuned it out way back when I was a toddler or something. Because even on editing those videos, I don't even hear it. Now, having had it pointed out to me, I went back, watched one of them, turned the volume up all the way, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally understand how distracting that is. It's just one of those sounds I don't hear anymore. Because I guess my brain is so used to filtering it out. These windows over here are open. I can hear them out there now. Hopefully it's a lot quieter than if I were actually sitting outside. So I do apologize for that. It wasn't intentional. I just don't even hear it. So that's why I moved in here this week. So part 4 of the bullet journal method is the art. So it's the intersection of form and function, which I love. I love that idea. I want the form of my planner to be aesthetically pleasing. I want to look at it and like it so that I want to use it, but I above all want function. Above anything else, function is my baby, right? So at the beginning he talks about the art and he tells like a little anecdotal story. I'll let you guys read it. On page 233, he says, your bullet journal can become whatever you need it to be. Figuring out what you need it to be, how it can best serve you is part of the practice, and it will change over time. And he said that in one of his interviews. I cannot remember where. The only reason I know he said it for sure was because Rhomany said that he said, somebody asked Ryder Carroll, what, 5 years time, what is your bullet journal going to look like, or what will bullet journal be like? And he's like, I have no idea. I'll be a different person 5 years from now, so hopefully my bullet journal will also have evolved along with me. So it should be whatever you want and need it to be. That's kind of the whole point, right? And he does talk about a lot of what's in this section is about customization, and he does have a little caveat right at the end of this introductory part of the section. Is he talks about maybe holding off on really complex collections until you're really comfortable with part 2 and part 3 of the book. So until you're really comfortable with like part 2 is like the nuts and bolts, what I consider the system. Part 3 was more of the mindset, which I consider more of the method, if that makes sense. In my head, those are two different things. That does not mean that has to work that way for everybody by any stretch. That's just in my head how I kind of put those two things together. So he says until you're really comfortable with those two different kind of pieces that work together to make your bullet journal, don't feel like you have to jump headlong into customizing things, because he doesn't want you to get turned off by things being overly complicated. So he talks about, I love the diagrams in this book. They're all done on dot grid paper. We've talked about that before. We're on page 235. He talks about the key concepts of customizing. So he says, extend your bullet journal with custom collections. Custom collections should serve a purpose, define your motivations, and then study your effort. So again, it's that same concept of plan, do, act, repeat, plan, do, right? That constant iterating of make sure you're reviewing, make sure you're not only just planning or not only just doing or not only just planning and doing, but also reviewing and changing what you need to review and change. And then of course it continues with less but better. This is page 236. Function over form and future-proofing your design, and then getting ideas from the bullet journal community. So function over form is obvious. He says your notebook doesn't have to be beautiful to be valuable. Design should always serve a purpose. I have been telling myself that over and over and over as I have been prepping, because it's a bullet journal. There's not a ton of like setup for the whole month, but the monthly pages, I knew coming into August there were things I wanted to add to my bullet journal. So I had to keep telling myself, because I was watching so many videos late at night and getting so many cool ideas, and I wanted to do all these things, and it was just monthly stuff. It was a lot of trackers. We've talked about trackers before. I I need to keep telling myself that anything I'm putting in here needs to serve a purpose. Anything, any design needs to serve a purpose. It's great as long as it doesn't get in the way. And then future-proofing your design is, you know, just make sure that if you're setting something up, make sure that, you know, be kind to your future self. Make sure that if you come back to it 2 or 3 years from now, you're going to understand what it was, what it said, what it was for, that kind of thing. I usually don't include keys with anything. Like my bullet key is the same as it's been for a really long time, regardless of whether I've been in a bullet journal or a different planner or not. When he released the updated key, that was what I immediately adopted because I really liked it. Once I got past the needing a task box, I really had a hard time with going to a task bullet because bullets were notes in my head. Thank you, PowerPoint. But it is convenient to have bullets be tasks because then all of the other symbols kind of build off that. So I don't include a key because I know what that means. If I include some complicated tracker that I feel I'm gonna need, which I probably won't because I have a really bad habit of not using trackers once I set them up. But if I were, I would include a key with that. So I could be kind to my future self. I could look back at that and go, the heck was this? Okay, there's a key, I can figure it out. And then the community, of course, he talks about the hashtag bullet journal, the hashtag Bujo. If you guys have looked elsewhere on YouTube, which I'm sure you have, there are a gazillion bullet journal videos out there where you can get all kinds of cool ideas. So he then jumps into custom collections. So he talks about a custom collection is designed for a very specific need. Let's see, there's nothing wrong with tracking what you're doing in a collection as long as you plan to do something constructive with the information. Again, it has to have a purpose. You don't want to just, unless the purpose of some, you know, whatever you're doing in a collection is purely for the sake of doing it, which is also fine. Like doodling in your bullet journal. If you love to draw, if you're really good at that, like I'm not, but if you're really good at that and it brings you joy and it brings you peace and it attracts you to your bullet journal so that you'll maybe do other things in it as well, then there's nothing wrong with that. That is adding value, okay? Let's see, he says the 3 key sources for custom collections are goals, challenges, and tasks. And my page just turned. Let me get back where I was. This is the one thing about not sitting down while I record this. So having goals, challenges, or tasks. He says custom collections are a good place to break that down. So like, you know, goals, obviously that kind of speaks for itself. Challenges, if there's something you're trying to get through or overcome. And then tasks, a lot of times that one, for me at least in my head, is like the projects one. Like I'll have a project spread for a big project, so it's got tasks and then it's got subtasks. So I kind of want that all together in a collection and not sprinkled randomly throughout my days. And then on page 240, he says your first steps for custom collections are brainstorming. We talked a bit about brainstorming in the part 3 read along. Examine your motivations. So why are you taking on this project? What does it need to address? And making sure you get at the underlying cause. And he says, why is getting at the underlying cause so important? This is on page 241. Motivation doesn't exist in a vacuum. It results from our pain, frustration, or desire. Whatever the case may be, we need to surface it before we can assure that our efforts aren't misdirected. By identifying our true motivations, we increase the potential impact of our actions. So to summarize that, he puts it really well. Understanding why you feel compelled to do something will help you better define how to do something. So, and that kind of harkens back to part 3 too, where he talked about looking at some of your tasks and understanding why exactly you're pursuing a certain goal. Look at how you've worded those tasks, and maybe you need to change your perception or change that goal. You know, that may entirely be possible. And then he gives the example in here, if you walk through it, walking through it's a lot better than me describing it to you, about planning a vacation basically. So it's kind of a sample project for you. And he walks through everything. Why do you want to go on vacation? You know, ask yourself the 5 whys. Why do you want to go on vacation? Well, why? Well, why? 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 Because you keep kind of going a level deeper each time you answer a why, and that'll get you to like your root cause for wanting to go on a vacation or wanting to pursue this project. And then he goes through, let's see, the next section is design. That starts on page 244. He says, the only thing that matters in Bujo is the content, not the presentation. The goal when designing our collections is to maximize their functionality, legibility, and sustainability. So then he breaks those 3 down. So under functionality on page 245, he, again, like we talked about at the intro of part 4, less but better. Form should never obscure function. Distill your design down to the essential. And collections are tools that are meant to help you progress toward your goals, not stand in their way. So to me, that kind of reminds me of his idea of good friction versus bad friction, which I'm going to have a video coming out about that, kind of where we can discuss friction in the natural world, how that applies to friction in your planning, and both kinds, good friction and bad friction. I clearly should not be recording today. This and this not working together at all. Oh my goodness. On page 246, he says, start with less, but do it better. You can always add more later. Keep the content of your collections focused on your priorities. And then when we talked earlier about being kind to your future self, he says your collections should be as helpful to you in retrospect as they are in real time. So being able to go back and understand what the point was is helpful, and it's important, right? Maybe you had a goal, you let it go, and you want to revisit it. Well, then you need to be able to revisit why you let that goal go to begin with, so you don't go down that same path again, right? Page 247, he starts talking about legibility, and that's a lot about handwriting. My handwriting is not the prettiest, but it's not horrible either. So what I am not a handwriting aficionado. I'm not a hand lettering aficionado. I'm neither a pen or paper aficionado either. What I can say is if you don't like your handwriting, aside from exploring practicing, also kind of explore what kind of pen and paper you're using, because some pen and paper combinations are magical and some of them are muck, okay? So you may like a wider nib on a pen than others. I personally can't write with like a 1.0 millimeter nib. It's so sloppy, I feel like I'm writing with a paintbrush, but that's because of the way I write. It's not the pen's fault, right? So that's all I can say is, aside from practicing and being diligent in your handwriting practice, is kind of examine what kind of combination you have of pen and paper and those things individually, because you can find a combination that'll be magic for you versus muck, okay? And then he talks about sustainability. Every collection that we've learned about so far was a solution to a specific challenge. The index resulted from his frustration of not being able to locate content, holy cow, in my notebook. The monthly log came about in response to wanting to have an overview of responsibilities and time. So basically he's saying a collection should serve as a solution to a specific challenge. That should be the reason behind having a certain collection. Okay, so that gets us to page 250, which is planning. So he then goes back into this idea of let's plan a vacation together and walk you through it. And he does a fantastic job. He takes you through destinations, activities, time, budget, and then he has all kinds of collections and sub-collections. So he's got a mission statement, destinations, activities. This is all on page 252. And he walks you all the way through. I don't want to show every single page of it because that feels kind of like I'm taking away from the book, and I don't want to do that. But, you know, he talks about planning, lists, prioritizing, context, which I love. Because of GTD and David Allen, I am, you know, a big lover of context, doing things, labeling things, categorizing things by context. If you don't know what context is in GTD, and I don't use this as much now, this particular context, because of, I mean, mobility is a much bigger thing now with iPads, and I have a larger iPhone now, but you would categorize or tag your tasks by kind of like the area in which you would work in them. So if I had a whole slew of emails to answer, I really didn't used to like answering emails on my phone. I could do it much faster on my computer. And if I didn't have a laptop at the time, all I had was a desktop computer. So anything that was answering emails, anything I could do at the computer, all got tagged with computer, right? So then when I was sitting at the computer, I could focus only on the tasks that I could do at that computer. So I wouldn't be looking at, oh, I need to fold the towels, and oh, I need to do this, that, or the other. I'm at the computer. What can I do while I'm at the computer? It's a very stumbly explanation of what a context is. I apologize. So, like I said, I don't want to walk you through verbatim of him setting up this vacation because I kind of feel like that's me taking away from the book. He even gets into schedules, so kind of an itinerary of this trip to Hawaii that I totally wouldn't mind taking. I'm just going to throw that out there. And then he gets into trackers again. And there's a great quote by Peter Drucker, top of page 265. You can't manage what you can't measure. And like I've told you guys, I have a love-hate relationship with trackers basically because I'm really rubbish at keeping up with them. That's what it comes down to. I'm really good at keeping up with trackers when I'm trying to develop a new habit or get rid of a bad habit. Then I'm pretty good at trackers, but I don't need an entire page to track those things. If I'm gonna develop a new habit or get rid of a bad habit, I will try to only take on maybe one of those or one each, developing a good one and getting rid of a bad one, like per month, and try not to break the chain, you know, try to make it through the whole month. And then if I don't, I continue the next month until I can make it like 30 days or 60 days or whatever it is without having done that habit I'm trying to break or without developing that new habit. Or having developed that new habit. So I tend to only have a couple of things that I'm really keeping track of. I did put a tracker in for August because there are a couple of things that I'm trying to develop, a couple of changes I'm making. So I will show you that. I'm going to do a separate August setup video, which, like I said, is hard because it's a bullet journal. It's not like the whole month is set up, but the monthly stuff is set up. So then 269, he starts talking about customization. So long form journaling, habit tracking, and then he gets into community. And this is where he talks about all kinds of, by all means, look through the back of this book. He talks about some of my favorite bullet journal accounts on Instagram, on YouTube, and that's the tail end of part 4. Now part 5, he basically just talks about, you know, like the correct way to bullet journal. What is the correct way to bullet journal? And he talks about how he's loved watching it evolve. And then he gives his parting words. So there is a really cool like question and answer thing in the back, frequently asked questions. So by all means, if you get a chance to listen to this or check it out at the library or pick it up, do it. I have to say I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I needed this. I have been feeling, as much as I loved like my planner itself, I've been in a B6 for a while and I've been in love with it. I absolutely loved it. But I just felt like I was missing something. I felt like I needed a kick in the pants a bit. And I know part of that's been like health stuff, and that's gonna be an ongoing thing. That's just, had to accept that that's life going forward, as we're gonna have health stuff to deal with. But planning wise, I needed a kick in the pants, and this really provided it. This has shifted my perspective a lot. Coming up later in August, I'm going to do a video probably entitled Bullet Journal Lessons Learned or Bujo Lessons Learned, about having been in the bullet journal. By that point, it'll be almost, you know, a month and a half, 2 months, and stuff that's changed for me. Or maybe changed my perspective because of this book. So thank you to Writer Carol for writing this. Thank you to all of you for coming along for the month and being patient when my videos have been late for the last 2 weeks, and all the participation and sharing. I love One Book July, and the Organized Miss said it really well on Instagram in one of her stories. She said, is it just me, or does One Book July kind of feel like a planner family reunion? And it does. I look forward to this all year. I don't like summer. I'm not a summer person at all. Clearly, I am made to live in the northern climes where it's cold a lot. So summer never treats me well as far as like physically. So I need One Book July to cheer me up, basically. So thank you to all of you for coming along for the ride, for participating. I hope that you were able to take something beneficial away, even if it was for you to be able to go, I definitely do not want to do bullet journal method. Well then good, at least you know that now, right? You can cross it off your list. So thank you so much to everybody this year. I'm already looking forward to next year, and stay tuned because this book really got my neurons firing again. So I'm looking forward to more discussions, not necessarily all bullet journal method based, but just planner system based. I'm looking forward to that. So I hope you will join me. You guys have a great afternoon, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.